Hey, hello everybody. I want to welcome you to my first and unnamed podcast. This is number one of who knows how many. I'm really looking forward to it. Joining me so graciously on my first podcast is Sara Keller. And Sara, I gotta apologize up front. There will be no production to this, no technical advantage. What you see is what you're gonna get. And I have no idea where I'm gonna post it or what it all means, but I'm looking forward to spending some time, learning more about you and seeing what makes you go because you're such a fascinating person. And by way of introduction, Sara is a top loan officer. She is with Guild Mortgage, and you're in Clackamas. Is my saying that right? Clackamas, Oregon?
Clackamas. Clackamas.
Clackamas. And I
Yes.
actually Google mapped it,
Christmas.
and I still barely know where it is. I mean, after staring
It's a suburb of Portland. I have a house in southeast Portland, and it's 15 minutes from there.
it's 15 miles southeast of Portland.
Not even 15, like 10 maybe.
Oh, so now I know where it is. So in Portland, Oregon. And not only are you a top loan officer, I think your peak year was around $150 million. And I mean, and how much, just per point of reference, how many units in dollars did you close last month?
Well, last month we did 5.8 million and
Nice, nice.
16 units.
That's great. And this month,
It was good.
what do you think?
We're at 6.8 million with 17, I think.
Congratulations. That's great.
Thanks. We need it.
That is awesome. But in addition to being a top loan officer, you are a speaker and with growing popularity. So congratulations.
Working on that.
That
Thank
most
you.
recently spoke at Shayla's event in Reno. So good for you. And then you're also a coach. So right. So and then you're a loving mom and your daughter's in the business, which we'll get into in a little bit.
Yeah.
And then what you're becoming famous for is being a roving loan officer in van life. And so
Sitting
guys,
here in the camper van. That's the
this is so fascinating. So that's the introduction, Sara. Why don't you fill in some of the dots here and tell us a little bit about yourself?
I am living in my camper van 80, 90% of the time. So home based out of Oregon, but this is where I like to be. So right now, sitting next to a river somewhere in Colorado.
Wow.
And I've been in mortgage for 24 years, almost 24 years. My daughter is going to be 25 in November, so almost 24 years of mortgage. But started out
So everybody, when you're watching this, Sara is parked in Colorado in her van. It's 98 degrees.
as an assistant, didn't
Hold
actually even
on,
know what a mortgage was.
Sara, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yep.
So everyone, just be forewarned, Sara is working from her van in Colorado where it's 98 degrees and her Starlink is overheating. And so we may have some technical difficulties where she freezes for a few seconds, but that's okay. We'll fill in the time. So Sara, you just had one of those freezes and you can keep going if you want.
I saw it. I keep watching your face for facial movements to make sure if I know if I'm frozen or not. I am working off of Starlink. There is no cell phone service at all where I am. So this is entirely working off of Starlink satellite, which is also how I work. And I think I was saying, started out in mortgage 24 years ago. Basically, it was the assistant receptionist.
Apparently the universe doesn't want us to know how you got into
Was
the
just a
mortgage
single
business.
mom that really needed a job. And then worked as an assistant, as a processor, as a licensed assistant, and then originating for 11 years now.
Is that your dog outside or do you have a pack of wild dogs?
There's a pack of wild dogs. Remember how
Really?
we weren't going to edit any of this? Yeah,
No, we're not at all.
I'm
That's
at a van meetup, and there are a lot of dogs, including my trusty golden retriever, Cody.
wow. Wow. So how did you get into the mortgage business? I saw you got in, it looked like you started as a processor. What got you into the business?
Everywhere with me.
Oh,
Oh gosh.
Sara, this is part of that real. We're gonna get real.
Okay, we haven't even really had we haven't even had problems until now. It's not supposed to happen like this.
It's gonna be all right. So how did you get in the mortgage
Uh,
business?
my daughter was a baby, and my mom told me if I would just get a full-time job, everything would be okay. So I got a full-time job as an assistant to a loan officer, got paid like $1,500 a month and lost my daycare subsidy, lost my food stamps, and lost my WIC, which was Women, Infant, Children, and basically had $42 left at the end of every month after I'd paid for daycare and bought like my minimal groceries. And life really was terrible. It was really hard. It was really hard.
Wow.
So that was my first mortgage job.
So how did you get, did somebody recruit you? Did you just go knock on doors? What happened?
Oh, remember back then you like looked through the newspaper looking for
Yeah,
jobs.
that's right.
And I was juggling a couple different server positions at multiple different restaurants. And again, my mom was like, oh, if you just get a full-time job, everything in your life would be okay. And I got a full-time job and I would wake up, put my child in the back seat of the car in her pajamas at 6:30 in the morning, and then drive her to the worst, cheapest home daycare I could find. It was awful. I was worried. And then by the time I got off work and got back and picked her up and got back to the apartment I could afford to live in, it would be 7 o'clock at night, and I would feed her, put her in the bath, and we'd do it all over again the next morning. It was
Wow. Wow. But it turns out your mom was
rough.
right. If that full-time gig really.
I mean, it turned out good in the long run. It was little, that was 2001.
Wow.
2001.
Oh, wow. And then how did you go? You were a processor that looked like you were maybe a loan assistant. What was your path to being a loan officer, and how did you know that was what you were meant to do in the business?
Yeah, I've always been really, really good on the phone with people and then very technical. As a loan processor, I was the solve it of the challenging deals. I've always had a brain that really likes to problem solve. And so I was really good at that part, and I was really good on the phone. And I was working on a large team, and it was a core team. And I think that not I think, I had my own ideas of how I thought things should be. And I was really, really unhappy. I actually had been recruited for a job as a sales manager at a company that won't be named.
This is one of those pauses. Sarah will be back in a second once the satellite connects. Sarah, are you back? Nope. This is going to be such an interesting story. And wow, I wait for Sarah. I didn't realize that's a tough way to start in the business, man. You're back, Sarah. It's all good.
Okay, I'll relax.
Yeah, it's all
That
good.
time.
I'm not worried about it. Trust me.
All right. So I worked on a huge core team, and I just really wanted to do things my way. I had been recruited for a sales manager position, and at the last minute, I didn't get that job because up in their corporate office, someone who actually knew me, and I'll remember it to this day, sat across the desk from me and was like, this job is going to take a lot of hard work. You got to know how to work hard. Here's some guy with a wife at home raising his kids. I'm raising a child by myself and working like 60 hours a week. And I have somebody telling me this job is going to be hard and I'm going to have to work hard. Wow. So they didn't hire me. And I mentally was already 1 foot out the door. And at that point, I bit the bullet and I went to a local company in Portland as a loan officer. I was given a $6,000 bonus. I had, after tax, I think that was $3,000, and I had $3,000 in savings. And at that point in time, I could make it 2 months. And so I had 2 months to post some loans.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was terrifying. And it really turns out doing it the way I wanted to do it worked well.
Nice. And then in your first full year, let's say, how much did you produce?
Oh gosh.
No, there were small loan amounts back then. It was a different world, but
They were. I am not totally sure. I think I probably closed about 30 transactions that first year.
That's great. 3 a month for
Yeah.
rookie is great.
Yeah, I do remember, we had smaller loan amounts, but I do remember making over, I made at least six figures and I was so proud of myself. I
Wow.
probably didn't clear much over 100,000, but I remember being really, really proud of myself and being like,
That
oh my gosh, I did it.
that is awesome. And then who's taught you the business? Who's been your big influences, your mentors?
I started out with one company, as an assistant, and what year was that first crash? I got laid off. So 9/11,
2007, 2008.
no, earlier, 9/11 happened, and then things kind of
Oh,
crashed after that, and I got laid off. And then I went to work for a guy that had been working for a local Portland company that I ended up working for many years later. And he was out on his own and he needed somebody to help him. I answered, my family's from the big island of Hawaii. And so I'm looking through the newspaper for jobs. And my mom says, oh, look at this. Oh, Hana Mortgage. Oh my gosh. They might, and so I go apply for this job and I meet this guy and he's like this total white guy. I was like, Mom, this is not, this is nobody local. And I took the job and his name is Paul Dean. He's not in the mortgage industry anymore. And I really learned the basis of everything I do from Paul. Paul used ACT as a database, and he was absolutely religious about the input. And I I learned a lot from him. I worked for him for 5 years, and I
nice.
really feel like I learned the groundwork of everything in those 5 years.
That's great. And then along your path, who else poured into you?
I worked for Mark Alto. Before that was the big team I was on, and we
Mhm.
did have some hard times when I was unhappy and eventually left. And he has a different business now, and he's very happy in the mortgage industry. But Mark and I really, I think it was one of the first times where we rock and rolled. We closed a massive amount of his business together, and it was fun. And I think I learned a lot there also. In that company, he and I both, I left first and left the team, and then ultimately he left also. And I think he was in the core, and so I was doing core also through him. And back then it was still tapes, they sent you the tapes.
Yeah.
And then would go to some core events that were for teams. And I feel the core is not my favorite thing, but there's basics to doing business
Mhm.
that are still my basics of doing business, as far as my follow up and my status calls
Yeah.
and the routine things, my do or dies that happen
Yeah.
every week,
Yeah.
whether I'm in a camper van with no cell phone service or wherever I might be.
Yeah, you're non-negotiables. So the core definitely can give it a
Yeah.
good foundation and a
Yeah.
roadmap of discipline, which is necessary. So your first year, let's say you did 30 units, and then take us on how you built that to doing your peak year of 140 million, 150 million, and nearly 400 units. Now that was a crazy time, we get it, but even without that crazy time, you were still doing big business. I mean, you definitely got advantage of the wave, but you were still, you know, funding in the 70s, 70
Yeah.
million, and then you bumped up for the pandemic. But tell us how you got there. How'd you build
I
your
think
business that way?
I get asked a lot, how how did you do it, or how do you do what you're doing now? And I've always answered, it's not rocket science. I'm not doing anything special. I felt like in the beginning, especially because my small company I was working for in Portland was acquired by Guild not long after it started. And I feel like I flew under the radar for so long. No one even really noticed what I was doing or what my numbers were, because I built a business steadily by replicating the same great experience over and over and over and over. And so in the beginning, it's growing slowly, and then it just started to open up and open up by treating one person at a time the way I wanted to be treated. And I really think one of my non-negotiables, and it's really how I built my whole entire business, was status updates. I just call people, and people are like, oh no, I've got this great email format for updates. I'm like, yeah, but you don't get to know people through email, and you don't get to know people through text message. You get to know people by talking to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I built this whole entire business just out of doing updates. Here comes the dog pack again.
Here comes the pack of dogs again. I just wish your window was open so we could be seeing this.
There's a lot. Anyways, I feel that my business was built out of really, really hard work, some things that aren't rocket science, updating listing agents every single week at the same time every week. Do you know how happy that makes those people? And
Yeah.
then all they tell me is, I've never had a lender do this. And I've always been, especially because I coach, and it's not that I'm telling other people what to do with their business, but I'm like, it's not rocket science, but you do have to work hard.
Yeah, that is
You
so
know that.
true. In talking about your customers, I was stalking you on social media, and I came across your monthly success stories. That I was watching the one from May.
Oh,
How neat is that? And I'm a big.
that one, in all my 24 years in mortgage, oof.
That was so nice. If you guys definitely make sure you check out Sarah on socials. She does a really, really good job. I think that was on Facebook, the success story. Is that right?
It was Instagram and Facebook. I try to push things through to both. So my reels on Instagram automatically go to Facebook. So it's on both.
And so you help a recent immigrant and their family who comes to America and is working two jobs, Lyft and Uber, but you build a home loan action plan that gets them into buying a new house, and it was really a terrific story. So I can
And then
definitely
2 years. It took two
I,
years.
I know that's great. I can see how you serve your clients and why your clients love you. All right. So now, how crazy was it in the peak for you? I mean, 400 units, does that feel like you were in a meltdown mode?
Oh yeah. I I also thought that it would be a really good time to leave my partner of 13 years. I mean, I felt like I didn't have enough going on. So I thought it would be the perfect time to leave a relationship because
You
then you
like
could just work 80 hours a week.
you
In
like challenges. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
golly.
I did. Yeah, I mean, doing the business I do isn't challenging enough. So I like to do it from a camper van to
Uh,
make it more interesting.
but I'm so glad you brought up this, change because it seems, and by every way, everyone, I met Sarah at, her and I are in Renee Rodriguez's mastermind group, the Amplify Mastermind group. There's about 15 of us that actively participate. We sat next to each other at the last quarterly retreat or whatever it would be. And I really enjoyed sitting next to you. And so we got a chance
Thank
to
you.
chat a little bit. And so I know a little bit, not a lot about you, but a little bit about you. But it seems from what I know that you went through a pretty big life change coming out of the pandemic. You mentioned that you separated from a longtime partner, and that from that, it seems you've completely gone through a metamorphosis and are becoming someone else. Do you want to talk about that? And then we can talk about how that's impacting your business. But first, what was that? And
Yeah.
because now you have earrings and
Oof.
tattoos and live in a
I
van.
do.
Like,
I do. I don't have overalls on today. Sorry. It's way too
uh,
warm to put overalls on. That's what
uh,
I'm normally wearing.
so how did it happen? How did you go from just cranking it, top
Oh,
loan officer, speaker, coach, to the new iteration of you? What's your mindset on this?
I mean, one, I can always like kind of feel the tears in the corner of my eyes because it was such a big shift in my life. I I I feel like I was able to create a certain level of success in my life by just ignoring all of my problems and working and working and working. Ugly stuff, I don't have time for it. I'll just work more. And I hit this point in my life a little over 4 years ago. I was so unhappy and I wanted to be healthier. And I started out on a path of really, I got to this point where I was just willing to do anything. Talk therapy didn't seem to be doing it for me. I didn't want to sit and talk about my problems. I wanted to fix whatever it was. I wanted to deal with it. And for me, what ended up working was something called somatic therapy, which is trauma recovery therapy. And I tried a lot of different modalities. And so I started into this path. And once I was able to face some stuff, childhood stuff like we all have, full on, and understand that, I then looked at the relationship I had been in for 13 years and I was like, wow, this is super unhealthy. This is not normal. This is not what people do to each other. And I just started moving mountains. And I think the craziest thing about that was that my business was already really successful. But when I decided to go do the work, when I decided to be a healthier human, is when it really started to blow up on me. I had a manager who said to me last year, I was worrying about traveling, or how I live my life and in my business and being busy enough, especially when you're going into a challenging time. And he said, Sarah, you're happy and people are drawn to that happiness. And I have to say that, Ron, you saw me in a room and people were like, you have such a big bubbly personality. I don't think that's what you would have said about me 4 years ago.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the earrings and some tattoos, and I went through a whole process of really experimenting too. What do I like to do? What do I like to wear? I didn't even know these things about myself really. I
You have a
had
little
a child young. I've
self-discovery
been focused
process.
on her, and then I was focused on making another person happy that I was never going to make happy. And it's everything is so much better once I decided to go do the work on myself.
Wow. That's awesome. That is so awesome. So okay, you're having this self-discovery and you're learning how to be the best version of yourself and having self-happiness, which is all good. So how does that land you in a van? Like not everybody would go, my happiness would be driving around the country in a van.
Oh gosh. My ex, my partner of 13 years, he lived off the grid the last couple of years of our relationship. And so I spent about half my life in an off-grid cabin, and we adventured really hard together. I've climbed a lot of mountains. We backpacked really seriously. And so when I left, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to go create a new daydream. I mean, now what do I do? And so I put a deposit down on this van the same week that I left. And then at that point in time, everybody wanted a really cool Sprinter camper van. So it was a really long wait. I think the wait at that point was 2 years. But
Wow.
the dealership that I got my van from, I maybe did a whole bunch of mortgages for people that work there. So I
Nice.
up the list a little bit. And 10 months later, this van shows up and I go to pick it up. And I don't know if I will try not to swear on your podcast. I go to pick this thing
You
up.
can swear as much as
And
you want.
okay, I was like, holy shit, what did I buy? It's huge. I was like, whoa, because we were working so much then and making so much money. And I don't know, I just put like a $5,000 deposit down. But 10 months later, this thing shows up and I was like, oh, whoa, okay, that's big. I don't really know what I'm doing. And
Now,
I think I was going to like it. I didn't know I was going to love it.
so, I mean, you say it's big, but I think of living in a van and it
It's
doesn't
not
seem
big
that big to
inside.
me.
Yeah,
Like, what
yeah.
is it, like 15 feet long and 8 feet wide or something? 12 feet
It's a
long?
Mercedes it's a Mercedes Sprinter 144. So the standard length inside. Yeah, from the outside without all my extra add-ons, I think I'm 19 feet long and so
Mhm.
slightly smaller inside.
And so you sleep, eat, work, everything from the van.
Here, I don't know if I can do this that well, but let's see.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Bed
Yeah.
and let's see, my front seats, there's a blanket up there right now because it's so hot. I have the front cover on.
See that?
This table right here, so what I'm sitting on, which I don't, This lounger actually folds up into a seat, and that's where I work,
That's your
is
desk.
from that desk.
A
Yeah, I fold this
sliver.
into a seat, and then that desk opens up. It like I can have two monitors on it,
Oh,
and so I this is weekend mode right now, so the lounger's down because that gives me a more open space, and when I'm cooking and stuff, I have it that it's just easier for me to move around. And then I have work office time when the lounger is folded into a seat and the desk is open, which is actually also, mentally when I am home, I go to the office, and even though I come home just like everyone else in the mortgage industry, I'm still working, but I put my yoga pants on, I'm at my house. So the same concept for me to kind of divide between when I'm working and when I'm not in the van is the van is in work mode, or now the van is in relax mode. And so I've had to have that same
I
kind of
like that.
divide.
I like that
Yeah.
trigger. You
Yeah.
change your environment, change your mindset, go to work. I really like that.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean we're not still doing things in the evening for a client, right? But
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to stop that switch.
So I'm a home buyer in Portland, and my real estate agent refers me to you, tells me you walk on water, you're going to change my life, and then you do an intake with me, and I'm looking at you in your van, and what's the general reaction?
Yeah, because I don't ever use a fake background. It's so bright out here. I don't think you can see today, which is why I
No, you're
wasn't
right.
covering. But I don't use a fake background. I am always in my van on camera. And you know, the really interesting thing is the reaction almost all the time is a kind of desire to be living their life in the same way. There's so many people on video that are like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I've always wanted to do something like that. And that seems to cross all different industries when I'm talking to clients. I had one client last year. I was sitting in a park in Moab, and he said, let me get this straight. You're giving me mortgage advice, but you live in a van. And I was like, yeah, but I own several houses. That's why I live in a van. And I also, even those agent relationships, when there was the question of, well, what does this look like if I'm working from a van? I had to put it right and not get emotional. I didn't set out to be an inspiration, but the word is used constantly when people are talking to me. And so I guess that in a way, it's just become this example of you can live your life in different ways.
Yeah.
And that really scary piece of making a leap to doing it the way you want to sometimes brings a tremendous amount of success. Like maybe it normally brings a lot of success because other people are like, oh, dang, I want to do it my way.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like, your authenticity really resonates with folks, and is a magnet, and good for you. And that takes courage and being bold, which you seem to have a lot of both. Um,
I like to go against the norm.
all right, so let's before I get into, I'm second guessing myself. I should have done this first podcast live because we would get great questions. I'll have to just
Oh,
I'll
well,
ask questions that.
that means we just have to do this again.
No, we could definitely do this again.
Yeah.
So give me like a month, like because when I was next to you, we were in Scottsdale for the mastermind. You had just been in like 7 cities in 6 days, and I mean, it
That
was
was a
like,
rough week though, Ron. That was a
yeah.
lot.
So, but even now, I mean, you're in Colorado, going
Yeah,
to
I have to be in Vegas
Flagstaff, then
Wednesday.
going to Vegas, and then going to. So what, like, what's the road life look like for you, and how do you determine where you go, and what are you looking for?
Yeah. So I have a schedule because of my team that uh, we started a year ago. I right now I don't work Wednesdays, which means I'm still helping the team or answering their questions or whatever they need from me. But I use Wednesdays to drive and explore. So sometimes one or the other, sometimes both. So I have to be by Sunday afternoon wherever I am going to be for Monday and Tuesday, because Monday and Tuesday are still intense work days for me. And then Wednesday, I will sometimes move, but I also, if I'm in a place that I really like, I'll stay and explore and hike on Wednesdays. And then I have Thursday, Friday. I rotate weekends with my team. So I work every third weekend. So again, I have normally part of Friday and then Saturday and Sunday to either drive myself to where I need to be or explore or both. So my rhythm of moving and being somewhere I need to be by
You are frozen right now for a second and you can't hear me, but you're frozen. I will tell you, I
Sunday
watched,
afternoon.
oh, you're
Wednesdays
back.
also end a lot this year. I'm slowing. Oh, did I freeze?
You did freeze
Oh,
for a second.
okay.
You know what? I did see, and I really enjoyed your post where you let your customers know that you were on duty that weekend. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, I'm the one from the Keller team on duty this
Mm-hmm.
weekend. I'll be taking calls. I'm totally available. I really like that post.
We actually, and we do an email out to all of our agents on all of our A and B agents every Friday with who's working the weekend. So that
Yeah,
goes out every single Friday
yeah,
with
I
the
bet.
weekend rotation.
All right, so where have you gone? Where are the cool places you go? I mean, you kind of are attracted to wilderness and kind of remote places, and you go like some really remote places. Like you're like
I do go really remote.
just four-wheel drive in your Mercedes Sprinter 144 van.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we can geek out on car parts too and talk about upgraded suspensions and skid plates and Baja brackets, and but we don't have to.
There's no end of surprises. Okay, so where have you been? I've seen some of your social. I know you've been
Oh,
everywhere. Beautiful pictures.
this year, my well, just my favorite places this year. I went to Chaco Canyon finally.
Mhm.
Chaco, for people that don't know, is one of the most culturally important historical sites in the world, not just the United States. It's really remote. It's 3 hours northwest of Santa Fe, and it's completely unmaintained roads. So it's tribal roads you're driving across, and they do not maintain them. And if it ever rains or snows, it's almost impossible to get out this 20 miles of road. And so I got into Chaco on a Tuesday in between appointments. Wednesday was my free day. I woke up Wednesday morning and it was snowing. And I'm like,
Uh-oh.
oh no, I don't know what I do. And basically, the whole campground just gets up and leaves. And I'm like, "Hmm."
Oh.
So I stayed with two other vans and I did get a break in the weather and did a small hike. I'm going to have to go back to Chaco. And it is these just absolutely amazing Pueblo ruins. It's unbelievable.
Wow.
And Thursday it was still snowing and we made it a call, like a judgment call to drive out. I was coaching students that day for business coaching and I was going to wait till after my coaching call. And I thought to myself, I'm going to have to drive before my coaching call. I'm not going to be able to calm down enough because if it starts raining or snowing again, I'm just going to have a meltdown.
Yeah.
And so I drove out through more than a foot of mud
Ooh.
just for miles. And the ranger that I talked to beforehand, I said, well, this isn't the worst it's ever been. This guy goes, well, nah, no, this is pretty much the worst. And I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. I don't know how I'm going to get out of here. And he was like, stay in the ruts. Don't ever let off the gas. And so the whole van is just like,
Oh my gosh.
and the mud, I had mud caked on for so long. So I get out this road and the two other people I drove out with were all high-fiving and hugging afterwards. 20 minutes later, I'm sitting in a gas station parking lot coaching.
Oh, that's awesome.
I was
That is
like,
amazing.
I'm the coolest coach on the planet.
You
So Chaco
must have been
is the
feeling cool.
so much adrenaline.
Wow.
So Chaco was amazing. I just went to Capitol Reef National Park, and there's some amazing BLM land on a mesa. It's one of the coolest places I've ever stayed. Hiked a lot, and then I just came down out of the mountains, Ridgeway, Ouray, Telluride, Colorado area, and was just sitting in this little town of Ridgeway. looking at a map and headed up the hill to check something out, and literally found a spot that looked like it was out of Sound and Music. So stayed there
Wow.
for a week. Oh, and hiked
So,
and hiked. Saw a bear a little bit
oh,
closer than I would
a
like to
brown
see a
bear or a
bear.
black bear?
Oh, but a black bear. It was
Nice.
big though, but
Yeah.
I would prefer to see bears at more than 10 feet.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
yeah,
You were
that was
within 10
fun.
feet of the bear? How do you get within 10 feet of the bear?
You're just standing on the road talking to your friend, and then you're like, "What's moving in the trees?" And then you're like, "Oh, it's probably the wind." And then you look again, and you're like, "Oh, hi! Wow, what are you doing right here?"
And then I mean, you're like a free spirit because I think I've heard you say, yeah, I'm going to whatever to go to the, street fair,
Oh
or I'm
yeah,
going up to Canada to meet with the van people, or I mean, it's
yeah.
is that true? Is that
That
you just
yeah, it's actually I I feel like the van has taught me things. The van's name's Paisley, and I feel like Paisley has taught me things. Before I started living like this, and even in the beginning of living like this, I am, from the business side of me, that I am really, really routine and very, very structured. And I've never been very go with the flow. I don't think I was able to raising a child by myself. It might be my natural tendency to be a little bit more wild and go with the flow, but I mean, 25 years of structure of like raising a child by, I mean, everything had to be timed down to the minute and every penny had to be allocated, right? Like, so somehow living in the van has allowed me to be way more go with the flow. I don't plan much more than a week in advance tops. And I'm very, very open to whatever comes my way. And I pivot often because I plan to do something, maybe it doesn't work out or I don't like it or whatever that might be. And somebody invites me to do something amazing, or
yeah.
somebody invites me to stay on a 20,000-acre ranch outside of Santa Fe, or I make friends with John Wayne's son, Ethan, and he lets me stay on his property. Like, I don't know, just
Wow.
cool things
Wow,
happen.
what?
The coolest stuff happens though, Ron. Like, cool stuff like that never used to happen to me.
Yeah, that's very colorful.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So let's look at a couple quick van things. You have a short where you show people how you shower, and it's not weird.
Mhm.
Everybody's just, she stands in a tub, goes
Everyone
behind
goes
a
straight to
curtain,
Instagram and is like, wait a sec, let us look.
but I mean, like, and then you cook. Like, what do you normally eat? Do you cook food, or do you just have like
Oh
protein bars?
yeah. No, I don't. I don't like to eat out very often. I cook a lot of my own meals. I cook in here. I use an induction cooktop. I also have a single burner butane that I'll use outside.
Mhm.
But you know, feeding just myself was a weird transition when I became an empty nester and single. That was a strange transition. You're like cooking dinner and you're like, oh wow, this could feed 6 people and there's only one of me. So I think I kind of figured out how to do that before I was living in the van. So pretty simple salads and a protein,
Yeah,
sometimes fancy ramen with a whole bunch of vegetables
fancy
into it.
ramen.
I'm being
Is
being
that an
lazy.
oxymoron? Fancy ramen?
Oh no, no, it's like I could pull it out right now, but I won't show you. I no, it's like higher quality ramen, and then
Top
I'll
end ramen. I get you.
yeah, high end top ramen
Yeah.
and vegetables, and but mostly salads and simple things.
And you'll drive to a town because they're known for their vegetables, like fresh vegetables. Like, I'm gonna go to this town, I'm gonna get the best
Oh,
zucchini.
farmers markets are my thing. Fresh
That's
greens are my thing. I actually was just in Grand Junction, Colorado, and happened upon. I use an app called Harvest Host. It's normally farm stays and buy some stuff from the farm. And it's pretty stoked about that place.
that's awesome. And then how do you feed and support your referral relationships? Like, what like, I think of loan officers starting today and all the value they try to give real estate agents, and they're meeting with them, and they're going to open houses with them, and they're creating flyers for them. They're doing all this stuff that is pretty localized and in person. What how do you do? How do you stay? Obviously, you're critically important to them, but how do you keep that relationship supported and healthy?
Well, one of my dirty secrets has been that I have always had phone-based relationships. I have agents that I am deeply connected to on a personal level that I have never met or met once or twice. My relationships are created like this,
Yeah, nice.
and they are deep relationships. I think, how do I maintain them? Pick up the phone and I call someone who's important to me and ask them how they're doing. We talk
Yeah,
about life and they ask me where I am. When I'm home, and I will be home in 10 days, which is kind of crazy because I haven't been there in 5 months. I will see a lot of people. I actually had to like look at my calendar and think about pacing myself because I have a tendency. I came home at Christmas and like 3 days later we had a party with 50 people at my house.
wow.
I have a tendency to do things like that. And so I have to pace myself a little bit because I will see a lot of people in the 6 weeks that I go back to work.
Oh, that's great. And you know, I mean, that's the way you've had your relationships, support your relationships. This lifestyle works great. I got two van life questions, then we'll get to a couple personal questions and we'll wrap up. First,
Okay.
how many miles do you drive, and how much do you spend on gas?
Mm. So I have a 47-gallon diesel tank. I have an upgraded fuel tank so that I can drive 600-ish miles before I have to fill up. I do try to fill up when there's cheaper diesel. So, especially with such a big tank, that becomes possible. I'll know different states I'm driving into. I mean, come on, I fill up before I drive into California every time. Like at the last second, are we on the Arizona border? Okay, like top it off.
Yuma.
I drive not as much as people think I drive. I don't like to drive for more than 5 hours in a day. That's about my tops. I'll do like 3 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon if I'm doing a long drive day. Tomorrow I'll do 6.5 hours, which is not something I enjoy doing. And I'll take some big breaks. But
Have you
in
become a
general, I
good
drive
driver?
less than people think.
Have you
Yeah.
become?
Oh, I
Yeah.
think I was always a good driver. But you see some crazy stuff on the road
Oh
when you're
yeah.
driving a lot. The group of people I'm with, we actually just all had a conversation about the worst semi truck stuff we've ever seen. And you see some people tweak out and
Yeah.
driving crazy. I think all of us have seen some bad accidents.
Yeah.
My friend Jeff hit an elk a couple weeks ago, which
Ooh.
that's a big fear. I don't
Yeah.
drive at night. I only drive in the dark if there's some absolute necessity. I can't tell you that, but I very, very, very rarely drive this vehicle.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Well, I mean, we could talk about van life forever. I mean, there's so much to it. We'll have to do this again. But let's talk about a couple of personal things and wrap up. I think that you think, I'm guessing, this is a guess, but if I were to guess, I think that your possibly greatest accomplishment, as you would see it, in the mortgage industry is leading your daughter into it. Is that accurate or?
Oh, I think it's two things. I think money has never been my driver, so it's weird when people ask me my answer dollar volume because you actually have to look it up. I can't tell you a lot of the time what I've done. I hope that I've changed people's lives. I really my tagline is spreading the love one home loan at a time.
Yeah.
And when we go into those like deep dives into ourselves, when you're like, well, what's something I didn't get? But love in some places that I needed it. So I'm constantly dumping it into other people. And so I think my two big things are that and absolutely leaving it to my daughter. But there's some hesitations about leaving it to her. There's been some conversations. She watched me do this for a job and raise her, and there's some hard stuff. I never volunteered at school ever. I never went on a field trip.
Mm.
I wasn't super involved ever. I wasn't able to be. And so there's been some moments when we talk about her taking it over where I've had to ask, like, I want to give this to you. I made this big thing and I don't know if I want it anymore. Can you take it? But also that, like, hey, are you sure this is what you want? Because if it's not, it's okay.
Mm.
In her own words, especially if she watches this ever, she's told me before, I'm gonna be a bigger deal than you are. Knock yourself out, sister. She
Yeah.
honestly is a better salesperson than me. I'm probably more technical than she is and will ever be. She's incredibly charismatic. You've seen her on my Instagram.
Yeah.
She is going to be a force to be reckoned with in our industry. She's still young,
I,
and
I,
she's going to have success at a way earlier age than I had also. So there's some stuff about
yeah.
that I
She has the advantage
have.
of you setting the path, so that's super helpful. Okay, so I can't help myself but ask this. We we had a
I'm like,
breakthrough.
what?
We had a breakthrough at Mastermind last time. I don't remember how it came about, but you're being bold and courageous, and you're putting on the universe that you are open to meeting, a Mr. Right if Mr. Right is out there in the universe. And that's a bit of a change for you a little bit. Is that true?
Feel more ready. I think the first couple of years I was on my own, I really just needed to be on my own. It's interesting because a lot of the band community will travel in groups, and people will in the last year like, well, we've never met you before, and that's really because I traveled and I was alone. I traveled alone. I did alone. I just needed to be alone, and now, yeah, I miss having an adventure partner. And so I did bring that up, but I still, what we talked about was creating time for those things. And still not so great at that.
I
Working on
remember
it.
I remember being at a Tom Ferry event in the early thousands, like 2001, 2002. And Tom Ferry just got kind of reacquainted with his dad and was starting to work the events. And Tom was talking about how his search for a wife, and what he did is he wrote like 5 pages of exactly who the person is he wanted to meet to be his wife. And like within 60 days, he met that person, and
I
so
need to write it down.
yeah, so you
I
need you need
do.
to just write the description of who your perfect, significant other is, and the universe will put it in your path, especially since you drive all over the universe.
I know people have said, like, how are you ever going to meet somebody when you're moving around all the time? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I just
Yeah, that's exactly how you meet people. You see a lot of
worried
people.
about that. Yeah, I do see a lot of people. And I'm constantly bubbly and hi, I
Well,
like to
nobody's
know
constantly
things.
bubbly, but you're
Well,
naturally.
okay, sometimes I like to be alone entirely. I don't want to talk to anyone, but I do have a tendency to I enjoy smiling and saying hi to people even when you're passing them in the street because I like making other people smile.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really awesome. You have been great. This has been, and hopefully I'll be able to post this someplace where somebody will watch it. I'll work on that this afternoon. But you have been
And a
so
name. We have
awesome.
to come up with a name.
I know I'm gonna have to come back. I mean, I don't know if you have it, you can send me. I don't know.
Mortgage musings with Ron.
Mortgage
Um,
musings, huh? I wish I could put it like on the road with Ron, but I'm.
Oh, then I think I get to do on the road,
Yeah,
Sarah.
no,
It could
you're
be
you're
the
you're
topic
the
of.
you're the
I think
roving.
we just came up with the topic of my podcast.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
the name of it.
So how do people connect with you? How do people, if they want you as a speaker or a coach, or just want to connect with you, or if they know you want to learn about more about Mr. Right, the candidate, qualifications for Mr. Right, how do they connect with you?
I think my social's great. The Roving Loan Officer on Instagram, Sarah Keller on Facebook.
Nice.
Also, easy to find my work email as well online. Sarah Keller, Guild Mortgage, not hard to find.
Nice. Anything else you want to
Yeah.
wrap up with before anything else you want to say?
Oh my gosh, Ron, thank you.
Yeah.
You are doing your very first podcast. The next one you're doing, you're having somebody pretty darn well known, and I get to be the first person. That just is a compliment. That thank you.
You are
Good
perfect,
gauge.
and I wanted you to be the first because I wanted to hear your story. I mean, I'm captivated by your stories. This is just the podcast thing is just an excuse.
Aw, thanks. Well, and
Well,
next time we need to do like an Instagram live together or something so people can ask
yeah,
questions.
no. The next time we do this, I'll be doing the podcast live, but it's
Okay.
baby steps, Sarah. Baby steps.
Well,
Yeah,
hey, you did it. You're
yeah,
doing it.
yeah. We're doing it, and
And
hopefully,
that was fun too.
I'll finish it. This is great. I could talk to you all day. I'm gonna stop the recording. Hang on, stay online,
Okay.
Sarah. If you guys watch this, thank you. If you have any feedback, give it to me. Tell me I could have done better, how I can get better, encouragement, whatever is on your mind. Engage with me. I appreciate it. You'll see you next, probably another week, another podcast. Thank you. Okay, hang on, Sarah.